told myself that if I could not do Ganja and Hess, the one movie I really wanted to cover was Sweetback's Badass Song, which is a Melvin Van Peebles movie from 1971. And it was very low budget, very revolutionary, very DIY. And it was shot in about 19 days. And Melvin Van Peebles did everything in this movie. He starred in it, he directed it, wrote it, edited everything.
Mhm.
And basically involves, the title character who is seen as he basically is raised. He's an orphan who's raised in a brothel, loses his virginity at a very young age to one of the prostitutes, which is where he gets the name Sweetback from. And he's played in that instance by a young Mario Van Peebles, which I don't know. That is the source of some controversy because Mario was very young at the time. I'm not sure
I don't
how.
think it traumatized him just from listening to them talk. That's just my, but I don't know.
Yeah, just saying whatever moral judgment I have on that, I'm deferring to Mario.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
But
We weren't there.
um, but anyway, so Sweetback grows up, in this brothel, and he's involved in these little kind of theatrical presentations that seem to happen upstairs. And he, of course, I think they're kind of somewhat adult oriented and
Mhm.
usually involve him, dropping his drawers and, banging somebody. And the cops, I guess, are these two cops are in trouble, these two plainclothes policemen, for they're trying to get some kind of pull in the department, and they need to do more as far as bringing people in from downtown. And so they're talking to the guy who owns the place. They say, well, we need a guy, we need a brother who will go in and, just get us to question him, just to make us look like we're doing something.
Mhm.
And so Sweetback gets volunteered for this. And he goes along and they cuff him and they are taking him downtown. And then there's this incident happening and they arrest another guy. And the guy is this character named Moo, who I guess is a young
He's a
black.
trip.
Yeah, he's a young Black Panther.
Mhm.
And so they cuff him, take him along. And at some point they go up to those, I guess, famous oil rigs up in the Los Angeles hills. And they uncuff, or they don't really uncuff Sweetback, but they separate him from Moo. So basically, they're going to rough Moo up. They're going to beat him down. And as Sweetback's sitting there watching it with one cuff off one of his hands, and he's seeing this brutality that's being visited upon Moo, he just takes the other cuff and he just wraps it around his knuckles and he uses it like brass knuckles and he beats the two detectives down and
Mhm.
basically uses it like brass knuckles and they end up in comas. And so suddenly, he cuts Moo loose and suddenly he's a wanted man. And so
Mhm.
everybody's looking for Sweetback and he goes on the run. And there's kind of a long, convoluted story where a lot of stuff happens. At one point, he and Moo end up getting brought down to the safe house, and the safe house is actually like the hangout for a bunch of bikers and a bunch of white bikers. And their president, in a fit of just serious unreality, is a woman, and
Yeah.
and she's challenging him to some kind of a competition or I guess, contest or a duel or
A duel,
whatever.
yeah.
Choose whatever you want. And he says, fucking. And so, of
Yeah.
course, then he bangs her. And of course,
She doesn't seem to regret it.
she doesn't seem to regret it. Yeah, nobody who, nobody gets banged by Sweetback uh, seems to regret it much. But there's all this. They eventually, kind of get left at this safe house. But I think the bikers end up doing them dirty and
Mm.
just tipping the cops off. And so the cops come and get them. I think they end up killing the cops. Um, but the cops, meanwhile, are running wild in the neighborhood, and they are, the guy who owned I guess, the theatrical performance place or the brothel or whatever, ends up getting beaten pretty badly and tortured, and they kind of fire off guns in both ears, and so he ends up
Mm.
deaf. Um,
Yeah, I felt sorry for that guy.
yeah, people are getting killed, and they take him down to be identified. No, they're not Sweetback.
I haven't seen Sweetback. I keep
Yeah,
telling you, I haven't seen Sweetback.
yeah, it goes into the whole goes no, nobody's seen Sweetback, and it goes into the whole legend of those who know won't tell, and those who would tell don't know. And
Mhm.
but I think eventually, like, Moo gets apprehended, and he ends up on a slab. But Sweetback is still off on the run, and it turns into this very surreal kind of film where he's hiding in the hills, with all these hippies, and they don't find him, and he ends up doing this thing and that thing, and he's heading for the Mexico border, and just on the run from cops every step of the way. There is a there's kind of a revolutionary church with this pastor called Brer Soul, who is very much like down with the revolution, and he's kind of with them every step of the way, and you hear kind of this gospel kind of feeding into this guy running. After a while, you don't
Hmm.
see
Hmm.
the parish at all, but you hear them a lot because they're almost being used as kind of a Greek chorus.
Yeah.
And as he's on the lam with these cops chasing him, it's almost like he seems to evolve to like a Christ figure or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
kind of like an outlaw Christ figure.
Yeah.
And just and they show these bits where he's running through the desert and he's solarized and all this stuff, and it just felt everything just feels very raw and very rough and very
Hmm.
underground.
Hmm.
And finally, he makes it across the border. I think they have some redneck cops out there with their, bloodhounds and everything. And Sweetback, getting across the town, ends up killing a couple of the dogs, and you see him float in the river. It's kind of like, okay, did Melvin Van Peebles find it necessary to kill a couple of dogs?
Maybe he just found some dead dogs. No, I don't
Maybe. It's like, I hope not, but
Mm.
yeah, they were there, and I was saying to Heather, you got to see this movie. You got to see this movie. And she came home the other day after I'd done kind of a refresher on it, and I said, "Yeah, I'm kind of unrecommending this to you. You're not gonna dig the dead dogs,
Mhm.
you know."
They don't linger on
But
it though.
no, not terribly. And so he finally gets across the border, and then there's this whole end caption that runs across screen as it shows him just running in the distance that says, that he's going to be coming back, and he's going to be, quote unquote, collecting some dues. So all I can think when I saw that is, okay, so a lot of the white liberals who were so horrified by the idea of black exploitation, and so, who would have really been bothered by this, that probably had them shitting their pants.
Probably.
Yeah, this
And
movie would explode a few heads today.
uh, it,
Yeah.
it probably exploded a few heads back
Oh
then,
yeah.
and Huey Newton apparently was a big fan.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, interesting.
You know that Bill Cosby gave him the last $5,000 he needed to finish the movie. Did you know that?
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the movie only cost like 50,000 or 100,000 at the most. But yeah,
Man, that seems very
it's the best thing
un-Cosby
Bill
like.
Cosby ever did.
Yeah. There's that, and there's those 2 or 3 movies they did with Sidney
Well, hey,
Poitier,
now
that
my favorite
you
is
know.
Mother Jugs and Speed.
Yeah.
Bill Cosby is the bomb in Mother Jugs and Speed.
He is, just with loose cannon with the sirens.
Yeah, I love
And,
that movie.
but, just, that's the whole thing. I guess a broken clock is right twice a day. But, I don't like to give Cosby a lot of credit,
Oh,
but,
I know.
credit where
Yeah,
credit's due,
It's just fun trivia. It's not an
Yeah.
it
endorsement of
is.
Cosby, but
No.
and
We
that
can
movie,
talk
That's
about
that
historical
cartoon
facts
he did
without
as well.
endorsing people's not that great behavior.
right?
So,
It's fiction,
Yeah.
y'all. Hey, it's fiction. These are fictional stories.
No.
Anyway, and what the actors did don't have anything to do with the fictional stories.
No.
But that movie made a lot of money. I don't remember exactly how much to you. I know it made about 10 million at least.
Wow. Well, that's pretty good.
I made many times its, but yeah, it was one of the most
In those
profitable
days,
movies.
that's a lot of money. Yeah.
Well, for 10,000
Um,
or $100,000, you make 10 million. I forgot how many times that is, 10 times, but basically that's one of the most profitable. At the time, it was the most profitable movie ever made.
oh
And then,
wow.
and it was the most profitable independent movie until Halloween, which did start as an independent
mhm.
movie, ended up becoming distributed by studios, but then it became the most profitable movie ever made. And then of
Yeah.
course Blair Witch years later. I don't know what's
Yeah.
topped Blair Witch, if anything, but when people talk about all this money stuff, it's not how much money you make in numbers, it's how much profit you make. So when people
Mhm.
Yeah.
say stuff like,
Yeah.
so when
Horror
people
films are good.
who are really into comic book movies, and I don't mean people like me, I mean like fan bros, and they'll be like, "Yeah, man, so and so made 300 million," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it cost
Yeah, but
200."
what was the budget?
Yeah, here's the
Yeah.
budget. Like
Cost
I remember
310 million to make.
yeah, that when Superman, any Superman movie, fans get super defensive because there's some cult about Superman, which here comes some heresy people to comic. I'm not into that character. I know everything about him. I like the archetype, but I don't care for the character. I do love the Christopher Reeve movies. I saw the re-release of 2 in the theater and covered it on this channel, so watch
Yeah.
it. But what I was saying is that when Superman Returns came out and when Man of Steel came out, everybody's like, well, they underperformed the studio. And then the fanboys like, no, they didn't. They made hundreds of millions. I'm like, dude, they cost hundreds of millions. They
Yeah.
didn't,
Yeah.
like, they didn't really
Do
make a
not
profit.
understand how profit works.
No, I know it's hilarious. But yes,
Yeah.
that was a very apt summation of Sweetback. I think it's really I find that movie very influenced by Kenneth Anger, either through
I
osmosis
can
or
see
directly.
that.
I mean, visually. I mean, the stuff he was doing with the editing and like you mentioned, the solarization and the dissolves.
Yeah.
It's an extremely psychedelic movie. And even,
Yeah.
I mean, scenes like the ones where he has sex with the female biker, it's shot, it's part of it at a remove, and just the way it's lit, and the brothel scenes where they do their performances. I mean, it's more like an experimental film in those
Yeah.
places. It is very underground. But he had just done Watermelon Man, which was a studio film.
Mhm.
That's what a lot of people forget about Van Peebles' chronology. I was talking about earlier on the show with y'all. He did Story of a 3-Day Pass in France. Then he gets picked up as one of the first black directors to do Watermelon Man, and nobody knew what to make of it. And I mean, for everybody who's seen the movie or is familiar with the movie, the concept was extremely offensive to many people.
Mm.
I love it personally, but the ending of that movie, it's a comedy, but the ending of Watermelon Man is extremely downbeat and an extremely
Mm.
harsh commentary on racism. And then he did Sweetback. He had a little extra money and he just went into the underground. And the only feature movie he made of note after that was Don't Play Us Cheap, which I thought was okay. It was kind of experimental. Did you see that? Did any of you guys see that?
Nah.
It's got Esther Roll from Good Times and some other familiar faces from that period, but it's kind of like a comedy, musical, experimental theater kind of thing, and it kind of hits sometimes, misses a lot. I've only seen it once. I remember though, I was very disappointed, but maybe that's just because I love those first three movies he did so
Yeah.
much. And you know, the Criterion Collection put out all four of those movies in a box set. I'm determined to
wow.
get it one of these days if I have any money. Um, I want to talk about. We're going to wrap up. I think with I'm going to do the last one, and then we're going to keep our ammunition dry to quote a very loathsome politician that everyone knows.
Oh,
We're going to
God.
keep our ammunition dry for next part. We're going to do a part two of this, and so I'm going to end with a character that also becomes kind of a Christ-like outlaw figure, and the character is actually based on a real person that became a Christ-like outlaw figure. And this was also a landmark movie. So you guys have probably all at least heard of this movie. If you haven't seen it, The Harder They Come,
Yeah.
1973, I believe. God, I should know that. 74. It's right in that period. I want to verify this because that's kind of important. But the point is, it was the first Jamaican feature film ever made.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it took them a little while to get their film industry off the ground. Took them about 80 years to really kind of start getting involved with film. But it was extremely profitable in Jamaica, and you know, it did become an art house and midnight movie hit. And this was, I'm talking about kind of at the time. Of course, over the years since home video, and a lot of it because of the soundtrack, it's a legendary movie now. I mean, it's almost a mainstream movie. It's not quite. I think it's not quite mainstream because the sensibility of it is not mainstream at all. But it is also important, and it was a movie that broke reggae music in America because first the Beatles did Obla Di Obla Da, which arguably they were either giving tribute to or making fun of reggae. It just depends on how you feel about the Beatles, how you want to perceive it. Though they did quote some reggae musicians like Desmond Decker as characters in the film, in the song. But
Oh, wow.
Johnny Nash did what I can see clearly now. That was a crossover, huge hit on like AM radio. But real like that, you know, roots reggae that was going on at the time from Jamaica. This soundtrack was the first time most Americans had ever heard it, and it sold a lot of copies. It's kind of like a Superfly, a movie that was independent but ended up getting bigger, and soundtrack helped carry the movie. You know, and in a lot of ways, not as much as the Curtis Mayfield work, but in the way they cobbled together the different songs by different roots reggae artists of the time. Some of them are still playing today, and kind of bookended by Jimmy Cliff's music. He does 3 or 4 songs, including the title track. It is kind of a Greek chorus to the film. It is something that keeps the film going. I mean, they do play certain songs over and over. So for people who are nitpicky about that kind of stuff, don't watch this movie. You'll just complain and you'll piss me off. But you know, like, I didn't want to hear Harder They Come 5, 6 times in one movie. It's like, well, fuck you. I listened to it 20 times in a row one time at home. But you know, it's an incredible song. It's even on Muzak now. I heard a Muzak version of it a few years ago at a grocery store. But the plot is about Ivanhoe Martin. Ivanhoe Martin was a person who was born earlier part of the last century, and in the 1950s he became an outlaw, and he became to the very poor people of Kingston and all these other shanty towns. He was like a folk hero, an anti-hero. He was kind of like Stagger Lee, except he, you know, arguably Stagger Lee was probably fictional. But and Stagger Lee, that archetype, is the same archetype that Dolomite draws from also. So we're talking about a deep well of black folk narratives and heroes for the people from several different countries, all by black people, that kind of overlap and influence each other or mirror each other over a period of decades. And I find that fascinating. But the thing is, this guy was he was nicknamed Raijin. I don't know what that means. I haven't looked it up. But he was killed by the police. Now, that's pretty much his story. So when we got to the 70s, Perry Hensel, who was a white guy, but I mean, if you hear him talk, he sounds exactly like every heavily accented Rastafarian who speaks patois, because that's what he grew up with. He's still a long-haired, crazy dude. And but he wanted to make this movie, and they decided to make it about Raijin, and then they were like, let's update it. Yeah, we could call a character Ivanhoe Martin. That's a cool name. Sometimes called Ivan in the movie by the character. Sometimes erroneously by film writers as Ivan O. Martin. For years I saw that, but it is Ivanhoe, like the knight character. So Ivan wants to be a musician. It doesn't occur to him at first. He comes out of this really poor little shanty. He comes into Kingston, which to him is like a big city, which it's really like a small city. And there's reggae playing all around, but it's kind of incidental to the story. But the song at the beginning of the movie, you can get it if you really want, which Desmond Decker also did. I used to have a single of that, a 45 single. I don't have any more, but that's what Jimmy Cliff sang. And there's eventually the movie there's his songs kind of follow the journey, like Many Rivers to Cross, which he wrote. And I'm gonna get back to that song in a minute. Many Rivers to Cross, which he wrote, is kind of like the mournful, kind of almost like gospelish song. When you get to the point where Ivan's kind of getting fucked over by everybody, which I'll get into in a minute. But he really is a tragic character. But to some people, I could see him being an unlikable character. He's definitely an anti-hero, no doubt. He would have done well in our anti-hero. I don't know why I didn't think of it. But if he wants to make it, and it finally occurs to him that he hears this music and he's like, I can do that. I have that talent. Nobody believes in him, including his girlfriend, who is the daughter. She's not the daughter. She's the, some sources do say is the daughter, but you have to actually watch the movie. Some people have problems doing that, but she's the ward of, she was an orphan who was raised by this minister, and the gossip around them by the women in the church, who say it in plain speak, is that they don't use this term, but basically he's grooming her for sex. He's raising her as a daughter, and then he's going to rape her and be a sex slave, because that's what grooming is. All right, that's very prevalent now, and people finally have a name for it. So that's what he's doing. That term's never used in this film, but that's exactly what he's doing. And so consequently, he wants her to stay a virgin. He's fucked up in the head. He's very hateful. But of course, he's a minister. I mean, so, he's already going to heaven. Doesn't matter how mean he is to everybody. But he's really truly an asshole character, loathsome. And for a while, Ivan goes to work for him, and he does like odd jobs and repairs, and like he builds a bicycle, and he starts to ride. He starts to ride around on the bicycle, and he gradually gets involved with the priests, the preachers, groomee, and they fall in love. But even she thinks he's got kind of pie in the sky, which that term is used in the lyrics to the title track. Thinks he has pie in the sky ideas, and pie in the sky has evolved, and partially due to another loathsome politician in recent years made it repopularize that phrase as an insult to anyone who thinks idealistically about something that they believe pragmatically can't happen. They dismiss you as just a pie in the sky, like you're nothing, you'll never make it. I'm sure.
Or they have a vested interest in it not happening.
Yeah, that's exactly how
this
that works.
politician ran for president in 2016 and didn't win. So anyway, but she leveled that against her opponent, Mr. Sanders, quite a lot, so calling him pie in the sky. But back in the 70s, it was used in this movie in Jamaica. And again, Ivan's got this thing, but he's either got extreme confidence or he's extremely self-deluded. He's either like an eccentric crazy dude who takes risk, or maybe he's kind of mentally ill. I mean, there's no easy answers with his character. He does whatever the hell he wants to do. Now, coincidentally, 90% of the time, that's against authority who richly deserves it. But sometimes he hurts some other people and he really doesn't care. But to be fair, before he does any of that, he's fucked over quite a lot. And the biggest fuck over is when he finishes writing his song, which becomes The Harder They Come, and he finds a guitarist who strums it for him as he hums the melody. And they got into the church. The girlfriend has given him the preacher's key to the church. Well, of course, the preacher comes in. You can't be playing that music in my church. This is evil music. What are you doing, man? And he's like losing his mind. I mean, his eyes are bugging out. They're getting like bloodshot and shit. And you're like, damn, man, don't, you're not going to get an Oscar. Calm down. And so really, basically, despite that, he has it down pat enough, which that part's a little unrealistic if you know anything about writing and arranging and recording music, but these people will know more about it than I do. So I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. But amazingly, after teaching one guy the melody on the guitar, he's got the entire song arranged to be recorded in the studio. Now, to be fair again, the musicians are hired hands, as a lot of the Jamaican reggae people were, the session men, bass player, drummers. And in this case, and in real life, the record producers a lot of times were parasites. They ripped off these people. They sucked off their souls and their creativity and left them with nothing. And it's fortunate that we know the names of so many reggae musicians now, because a lot of them are the ones, especially the dub ones, who are more experimental. I mean, I'm pretty sure Scratch Perry got ripped off a million times, but he got so frustrated he even burned down his own studio, which allegedly was one of the greatest in the world, called the Black Ark, and he burned it to the dust. He was so frustrated with the music, and he only recorded like 100 albums. He never stopped making music. But there's no dub music in this movie, but it has all roots reggae music. It's all melodic. It's very soul influenced. You could play the soundtrack next to Superfly, and there would be some resonance between the two of them. Those guys really were into black soul music, and I won't get into the history of reggae music because of the time length, but just for the sake of where we're going with this segment, as far as trying to be a little educational, reggae music took off in the late 60s. It wasn't called reggae at first, and it began with just people making music that ultimately became ska, and it was basically like pop music that sounded like American Motown music, kind of. And people would do something that, now I grew up in the 80s. Now Chuck to probably remember this. If you grew up in America in the 80s, and I was one of these people, at one time or another, you were or had a friend or saw a guy down the street with a big boom box that he took everywhere. It was part of his whole life. So everywhere he went, there was a soundtrack. And I was part of a scene like that. And I had a boom box for a while too. And
I love that.
You can't do that anymore because everybody's a Karen. So,
Wasn't
the
it
guy over there's playing
called-
Black Sabbath, fuck him. Even though they'll talk with their estranged parents on FaceTime out loud at work. So it's like a little bit of a double standard. So I would deliberately start playing music at Target on my breaks. It didn't disturb anybody like a Karen, but I could tell it didn't have the same, it wasn't as permitted as like people talking to their relatives about shit, which I think people talking to their relatives about personal shit out loud in a break room is actually more offensive than playing Black Sabbath. But that's just me. What do I know?
Agree.
But the thing is, these people, they called them sound systems. And so then they started remixing records, and they literally pioneered all that shit that later got pioneered in America by techno people like Juan Atkins, Grandmaster Flash, and hence hip hop and rap. And so, you have a direct lineage of black music from America to Jamaica, back to America, and it's all the same kind of groove. And I think it's wonderful and beautiful because I like all that music. I'm not a big fan of most modern rap, I will say that. I like hip hop though as an idiom. I like instrumental hip hop better, and I love dub music. I can relax and go to sleep to it, but I love melodic reggae music. I mean, and some of those guys did get big. Jimmy Cliff was one of them. Jimmy Cliff was Jamaican. Jimmy Cliff was not a Rastafarian, however. He was a Muslim, and I think in a way that added to the stunt casting. First of all, him being a musician, playing a guy and playing an aspiring musician. Second of all, a guy who didn't fit in with the Rasta music scene because he wasn't a Rasta. But he made it anyway because he was a brilliant musician and songwriter. And I would liken him more to people like Gregory Isaacs. I think Gregory Isaacs is amazing. Y'all may have heard his 80s hit, which briefly charted in America, called Night Nurse. Night Nurse is one of the most romantic, crazy reggae pop songs you'll ever hear. It's just infectious. But if I ever meet a woman, and it's happened, if I ever meet a woman on a dating site and she has anything to do with the medical field whatsoever, I woo her with that song, Night Nurse. I sing it to her, man. I'm serious.
For it.
It's worked every time. But so, you know, I love reggae, and I love what this album did for reggae. So I'm not going to talk about all the people on the soundtrack. I originally thought I'd do that, but I'm concentrating on Jimmy Cliff because he's the star of the movie. He plays Ivanhoe Martin. He'd never acted before. And his character gets screwed over. He presents this song, and they actually did film him playing it live, singing in the room with the musicians, recording it in one room, which, you know, most people didn't record that way even back then. No one does now, but it was live, and they kept that take for the movie. And I can watch that take over and over. I get just glazed over by his charisma, his energy, his voice. And the song is about everything that we've touched on in this session. It's really about, like, you know, being yourself, fighting the man, you know, the oppressors try to keep me down, treating me like a clown. They think that they have got the battle won. I say, forgive them, Lord. They know not what they've done. Because as sure as the sun to shine, I'm gonna get my, what does he say, peace, or make my side light, whatever, of what's mine. And then the harder they come, the harder they fall. They meaning the oppressors. So for the character, he's saying, I'm going to be a musician, even though everybody's a naysayer. For people who are into that song in Jamaica, and Rastas too, of course, it's like saying we're against colonialism, we're against imperialism. You know, fuck you. To me, it's a very punk rock song lyrically.
Yeah.
And not coincidentally, a lot of early punk rock people loved reggae, and it influenced the Clash being the one that made the most impact as an internationally known band. You know, because they actually broke in America doing punk rock and reggae in addition to pop music. And they actually refer to Ivanhoe Martin in one of their songs, "The Guns of Brixton." I didn't know that until yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have to listen to it again. I don't know if
Need to go back and listen to that.
I don't know if they name him by name. I don't know if they call him Ivan or Rygen, but they refer to the real life outlaw guy, and of course, sort of sideways to the movie. But in the film, he's a musician and he gets ripped off. This guy gives him $20 for a record, and of course, Jimmy Cliff, Ivanhoe, turns it down. But then he's so impoverished, and he has such big living beyond his means dreams, that he eventually succumbs, and he takes the $20 and he immediately blows it on fancy, cool clothes. And so this is what one point, besides the soul music influence, this is another point at which this movie intersects with blaxploitation, also the rebelliousness against colonialism. He dresses kind of like a funky Black American kind of character of the time. It's giant lapels, a vest. He's got like the little Dolomite cap, and he also he's into comic books. He collects Two Gun Kid comic books. So again, you have a Marvel influence when no one knew who Marvel was. And so he starts using two guns specifically because of the Two Gun Kid character, created by Jack Kirby. I always like to give him a shout out. And, you know, also, you know, the preacher finds his stuff and goes through his stuff, which to me is it's a simple scene, but I feel very violated every time I watch it. The preacher like goes in his room, he goes through his records. See, because my mom did this to me, and it's just despicable when parents do this to their kids. I find it, I think it's abuse personally, and a form of psychological abuse. But,
like, you gotta let your kids have some privacy, you know, they're people. They're autonomous human beings.
What a concept. And so
what do I know? I'm an anarchist.
Exactly. This guy's throwing the shit away. And he sees the Two Gun Kid comic, and he looks at it like, oh God, what is this? And he throws it away, and then he finds, of course, the Playboy. Of course, he looks at it, but he stops for a second longer to look at that. I wonder why. And then he says, "This is all trash. You're going to hell," you know. And so fuck that guy. But anyway, the bicycle problem comes right before the recording problem. The bicycle is the second inciting incident after dealing with the preacher. The bicycle incident, he builds the bicycle, he rides around and he tries to get work, and then he goes for a guy to help do some repair on it. And he says it's going to be done in like 2 weeks. So he goes 2 weeks later, the guy says he's going to keep it. And Ivanhoe says, "No, you're not, man." And he grabs the bicycle. The guy comes at him. And well, Ivanhoe happened to have a knife with him. And that guy breaks a bottle. And he's going to like try to just fuck up Ivanhoe. And so they tussle, neither cutting the other. Ivanhoe drops his, loses the knife. The guy gets a little too overconfident, trips, and Ivan shoves him, grabs the knife. He's above him, and he says, "Hey, man, I want to tell you, don't ever fuck with me." And yes, every one of these is a slice across his face. You don't actually see his face, but you see his hand on his face, and there's just blood, just tons of fake blood, like just everywhere. And I was like, yeah. I mean, and he didn't get away with it, though. He didn't go to prison because it was a first offense. So they trotted out some Jamaican weird law. I mean, I'm sure plenty of countries had their own forms of bizarre, eccentric punishment. We know America did. And so they strap him to a tree trunk and take his underwear down and whip his ass 8 times with this thing called a something stick. Some people call it a switch. It's like you would, well, not you, like us, but people, unenlightened people back then would punish their children with. And so apparently it hurts a lot. And
yep.
he urinates at the time, and then he's crying with his girlfriend. So he gets through all this, and he really thinks the music's the way out. And the guy rips him off, and he tells his girlfriend. And of course, by this time they're now living together. They've cut ties with the perverted preacher, and essentially she's not trying to hurt him. She's just like, "Ivan, I'm looking for work. I'm trying to get, you don't live in reality." And I see both sides of it. Obviously, she's totally correct. As someone who has financially and emotionally supported a partner who had the pie in the sky, quote unquote, artistic thing, and didn't like to work, it is hard to telling that person that. You don't want to deflate their dreams, especially if you know they are talented. But we got to eat, baby. This person I was with never learned her lesson, unfortunately. But that's the way it goes. But Ivan, well, he didn't really either. I mean, but he took it in a weird direction. So he needed money, so he became a pot dealer. So he starts getting hooked in with the Rastas and all that, and they start ripping him off too. And they start finding out that the ultimate source of their income is a bunch of rich white people in Jamaica, and some rich black people. And like he brings down $100,000 worth of weed through this guy, and they give him $15. And I'm just like, oh my God. And he's so passive. See, that's the thing about him. Like when he exploded on the guy and sliced him, that's like his last resort. He's not really an angry, violent guy. He's kind of a passive, wimpy guy. He lets people walk over him, and when it's too much, then he snaps and becomes the total opposite. So he starts, there's a police informant the guy who brought him the weed is a police informant. Total sleaze bag. Rasta guy who's pretending to be, big in dope, but really he's working for the police. The police he's working for is a corrupt cop who's also skimming money off of the whole ganja trade in Kingston. And so he's like, this guy keeps complaining about it not making much money. And the cop's like, go to the cops here. I'll get him to take him out. And so motorcycle cops come up, and they get nearer and nearer, and he has a flashback in his mind of being whipped over that log. And he just blows the hell. He has gotten a gun. He blows the hell out of one of the cops. And he gets home in his neighborhood. More cops chase him. He kills 3 more cops. And he comes in, his girlfriend's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he's like, "I told you I'm going to be famous somehow." And then she's like, "You killed a cop." He said, "Baby, I just killed 3 of them right outside." And he's just like he's totally like, a switch has gone off his mind, like, fuck all this shit. And so from then on, he gets turned in by some of the dope people working for the cops. So he, like Sweetback, becomes an outlaw running for his life, stealing cars, walking places, bought a second gun so he can finally be the 2-gun kid. And, he's a legend in his own mind. He is the Raijin, whatever that means. He has attained that level that real guy did in real life in his mind, his ego. And he's not trying to get his music back or make any more music. He's kind of like, I'm the outlaw, I'm the fucking, And one of his major influences that I would be a really terrible film person if I didn't mention, because it's very, very blatant and written up in every book, is that early in the movie, when he first comes to Kingston, he goes to the movie with a friend. The movie they go to see is called Django from 1966 by Sergio Corbucci with Franco Nero. And it is the key early scene where Django opens the coffin, takes the machine gun out, and kills about 30 Klansmen. And all these black people are you know, they're cheering. They love it. And that was real. I mean, that was in the story, but that was real life. Django was a gigantic movie in Jamaica. It was virtually unknown in America, but it made a lot of money in other countries, not just Italy. And a lot of reggae, and especially dub reggae people like Scientist and Scratch Perry, they wrote songs about these outlaw characters. They have a bunch of songs called Clint Eastwood this, Django this, and you know, James Bond this. Even a song that's used in this movie, Shantytown, starts out, oh, oh, 7, and it's about James Bond kicking in the Shantytown. You know, it's all like this mythology, you know, of these white anti-heroes that they're seeing. And Django in his own movie, he was an I mean, you guys are going to stand up to the army and the Klan with a machine gun. I mean, that's pretty revolutionary, dude. So, you know, when he gets toward the end, he's cornered because his girlfriend tells him where he's going to be picked up on this boat, and he misses the boat, and he's just trying. He's like Sweetback. He's just running around with these 2 guns. He's got the cool shirt he was wearing when he recorded his song. It's got a big yellow star on it on a dark blue shirt, and I think his mind is kind of gone, and maybe that's the only way he can deal with what's happening to him. His fate is sealed, and so a whole bunch of cops come up with machine guns. I mean, they like take the boat, you know, and again, like I said, his girlfriend's the one who gave him away, ex-girlfriend. So he's like, baby, what'd I do to you? You didn't know those cops. No, I'm kidding. She said. But it was a little perplexing when that happened. But then I wondered, maybe the preacher's, you know, holier than thou bullshit was more inculcated in her than she thought, you know.
Yeah.
But he's cornered on the sand on the beach of this island, and he's got the 2 guns. And then he starts, in his mind this time, the flashbacks are to the black people in the theater watching Django, not to Django himself, but the flashbacks of the people he was with watching theater and cheering Django. And so he just comes forward, you know, and it's real slow. And you're like, I guess the first time you watch it, you don't know what he's going to do. Is he going to put his guns down? Because obviously that's what they're going to tell him to do. So he puts his guns to his side, and they just kind of look at him, and they've all got machine guns. And, you know, he's just like, he just picks up his guns, like and then bam, you know, he's, you know, takes about 100 bullets. And, you know, that's the end of the movie. And the movie ends on this lovely Jamaican girl's lovely posterior in this tight skirt that's green, yellow, and red, dancing to the studio version of The Harder They Come, which had never been played prior in the movie. And one other pop culture crossover is that there's a television show that I'm particularly fond of called Daredevil, which I'm sure all of y'all heard of. And, you know, Daredevil, unlike most Marvel stuff, is like an extremely gritty, tough, powerful movie series. And in the last episode of season 1, one of the main characters has been murdered by Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio. Big surprise. He kills a lot of people. And the episode starts with his coffin and his funeral. And Matt, our main character, you know, is blind. He's got the dark glasses, so you don't see his eyes. And he's standing there, and it's all very formal, almost like a military procession. And the music that's playing is Many Rivers to Cross by Jimmy Cliff from that movie. And in that movie, and that was the episode where he gets the red costume. That whole episode is just, it's the greatest thing Marvel's ever done, in my opinion. Another controversial opinion. But anyway, so, but, you know, I guess this, you know, a lot of this character and this music and this popularity of this whole archetype of the musician, the outlaw, the savior, whatever you want to call it, you know, flows throughout Black culture. I mean, it flows also through obviously other people of color, underground and punk cultures and stuff too. Anyone who's oppressed, but we're talking about black cinema today. So, you know, it flows through all their art. And I think these last 2 movies we've talked about, well, and the movie that Kaylin covers especially too. I mean, really, touch on that in a powerful way. So anyway, so we're going to wrap up, people, and please subscribe. I know Chuck has something important to tell you.
I do. Oh yeah, ring that bell.
Yep.
Ring that bell for notifications.
Yeah, and also Kaylin wants to tell y'all something too.
Please leave comments and share with people and all that good stuff.
Yay!
I have lots to say, man.
What do you say,
Which
Justin?
thing you're trying to get me to say?
I say that the owner of our law firm sounds exactly like you, Henry, because he's always saying that about LinkedIn posts. You must like and comment and thumbs up. And I'm quite slack at doing
Follow
it.
us on LinkedIn. I'm
Oh.
absolutely kidding. Don't
Maybe
follow
a
us on
fraction
LinkedIn. We're
of
not on
financial
LinkedIn.
savvy will trickle down to poor old me. So thank you, folks. Have a wonderful evening. We're going to do a second part, but we're going to, like with the alternative sci-fi, we're going to make it as one long playlist block that you can watch and hopefully enjoy. So rock on. Take
Thanks
care.
all.